report that was released by Harvard University. It says that more than half of all grades awarded at Harvard College are now A's. And it's a sharp climb from past years that the university's top undergraduate officials says is eroding the school's academic culture. So this is from the people at Harvard. It goes on to say that in the report, they found that 60% of grades given to undergraduates were A's. And that was up 40% from a decade ago. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. The People's Voice podcast is an investigative news podcast where I'm dedicated to covering stories and social issues that I feel have either been underreported, buried, or not reported at all by mainstream or social media. The purpose of the podcast is to shed light on those topics and issues. In addition, I try to offer some insightful analysis, recommendations, and actionable solutions to address the topics and issues that I cover. The People's Voice podcast can be heard on all podcast and music streaming platforms. In addition, I put a video out on a weekly basis as well on YouTube, and for those of you who would like to watch the podcast. But in any event, we say welcome, and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today I want to get into the topic of grade inflation. I want to talk about grade inflation. And I know when the topic of inflation is mentioned, many people may immediately go to inflation in regards to cost, right? Economics, price. But today, I want to talk about grade inflation, and grade inflation takes place in education. Matter of fact, just to give a clean definition of grade inflation, it says here, grade inflation is the trend of awarding higher grades for the same quality of work. It is the trend of awarding higher grades for the same quality of work. And this is something that is occurring in education here in the United States. Specifically today, I want to talk about grade inflation occurring in higher education in American colleges and universities throughout the country. So that's what I want to talk about today, grade inflation. And I came across this because there was a story, a recent report in the New York Times the New York Post, where they talked about Harvard. So Harvard, in the story, the title says, Harvard says it's been giving away too many A grades to undergraduate students. And in this report, that was released by Harvard University. So this is not, kind of a gotcha moment, some investigative reporter covering this. This is a report that was released by Harvard University. It says that more than half of all grades awarded at Harvard College are now A's. And it's a sharp climb from past years that the university's top undergraduate officials says is eroding the school's academic culture. So this is from the people at Harvard. It goes on to say that in the report, they found that 60% of grades given to undergraduates were A's. And that was up 40% from a decade ago. It goes on to say, and they're quoting the Dean of Education of Undergraduate Education, Amanda Claybaugh, it says, and she said, current practices are not only failing to perform the key functions of grading, they are also damaging the academic culture of college more generally. And in my opinion, this is a huge story for so many reasons. Number one, um, Harvard University is considered, air quote, an elite university. And it basically has made its reputation because, it says that it has one of the most rigorous curriculums in all of American education. And so when you see stories like this, you go, well, wait a second. If this is supposed to be the top and elite school in the nation, or one of them, and they're admittedly giving out an increased number of A's, what is that saying about not only that school, but the rest of higher education in the United States, which comes into question? In that story, they also go on to say that the median Harvard College GPA for the class of 2025 was 3.83. And that was up from 2015, when the class of 2015 graduated with a median GPA of 3.64. It goes on to say the report said grade inflation accelerated in the late 2010s and spiked during the pandemic's remote learning period and has remained elevated ever since. In 2020, the most grades handed out were A's. In 2020, most grades handed out were already A's at the school. And again, I'm bringing this up because if this is occurring at Harvard, you can only imagine what is going on in other places. Well, just so happens, after reading that, I started to do some additional research, and I found an article that is on the Department of Education's website, which came out last month as well, where they talked about this very issue as well. And in their report, which is entitled Addressing the Grade Inflation Collective Action Problem, not only do they talk about Harvard, but they also talk about four-year colleges in totality. They say that from 1990 to 2020, four-year college grade point averages rose 16% at public and non-profit universities. It says A is now the most common grade awarded at universities, sometimes at comical proportions. Again, this is on the U.S. Department of Education website. So this is not some blog. It says, for example, in 2021, Harvard awarded A's 79% of the time. Damn. And Yale recorded the same rate of awarding A's in 2022 to 2023. When top marks are awarded to nearly every student, grading becomes a farce. It says this trend is commonly referred to as, we're talking about today, grade inflation. It says research suggests that primary drivers of grade inflation are first educators responding to consumer demand. Because as I have said a million times before on this podcast, education is a business, ladies and gentlemen. It is a business, okay?
Men lie, women lie, the numbers don't.
At all levels, it's a business. So one of the primary drivers of why grades are being inflated is because the students, which are the consumers at the universities, are saying, for my service, for paying for this service, I want to make sure that my grade is where I expect it to be. And that's what happens when the business of education takes place. It goes and let me just stop for a second because some people may be new to the podcast, and just so you understand, I too have college degree. I have multiple degrees, and so this is not a bashing college episode. I just want to make that clear. And matter of fact, those who have listened, I just my daughter just graduated. I just put my daughter through 4 years of school, so this is not a bashing higher education, but it does bring into question what is the value of the education that is being received if it is admittedly being reported that grades are being inflated at colleges and universities throughout the country. It goes on to say that in addition to educators responding to consumer demand for higher grades, it says that students self-selecting into less rigorous courses and disciplines are also a problem, because a lot of these schools are offering college degrees in things that I'm not against anybody being passionate about something, so I want to be clear about that. But some of these college courses, and you can get a degree, as Dave Ramsey says, in basket weaving. Like why are we doing this? Is to say that you graduated with an A from a university, but that's a whole nother subject. And then it goes on to say, also, not only do you have students selecting less rigorous courses and disciplines, but then you also have sites like Rate My Professor, which compound both drivers, because these kids get on these websites such as Rate My Professor, and this is not a commercial, but they can go on there and say some pretty mean things about some of these professors, which ultimately affects that professor's ability to go out and to get additional work, or the universities themselves, because this is all about marketing, right? Because if you know that Harvard has the elite rigorous program and the majority of their students graduate with A's and all of them graduate, they have a 97% graduation rate. When you go, well, what are they graduating with, and why is this happening? In addition, educators are recognizing this as well. Matter of fact, there was an interview that was done on the Merit TV program, Merit in the morning, Dr. Phil's Merit TV, where they spoke to an educator by the name of Dr. Rebecca Good. And she talked about this very issue as well.
Welcome back to Dr. Phil's Merit.
And she talked about not only the issue, but she talked about, the change over the last 30 years that she's been an educator and why this is occurring. So let me just play that quickly from Merit TV, and then I'll get back and close out from there. So
in 2021 school year gave 80% A's to their students.
Wow.
Now, it used to be that C's was the norm. That was an acceptable grade, but that is not acceptable for us anymore, is it? Our parents expect A's or maybe B's if they know their student, but certainly C is the floor, where it used to be halfway up the ceiling. So lots has changed in society since, well, just it has. And so our grading system has not kept up. Our school system has not kept up. We need to have a better grading system. That professor gave it an F. He gave it an F because it doesn't work with kids like ours anymore. We now have kids from other parts of the world. We recognize their disabilities. We want to work with their disabilities, but we want to grade them in a traditional way with those disabilities. Yeah. And so that doesn't make sense.
And she brought out some great points there. One of the last things that she said there, that you have such a large swath of students who are foreign students, and that's another thing that was pointed out recently as well regarding Harvard and many universities, is that you have an increase in the number of foreign students in American universities. So when she talks about the disabilities, she's really talking about their ability to learn within the American higher education system, because of course you're dealing not only with a culture change, but you're also dealing with a language barrier as well. So many of these universities that have these increase in enrollment of foreign students, this is also playing a part in that as well, because now you have these students who are looking for that reward, if you will, of saying that they graduated from an American university or institution with an A grade. Matter of fact, this was talked about as well by Bill Ackerman. Bill Ackerman, for those of you who don't know, is an investor and billionaire at this point, who is a graduate of Harvard University. But he talked about this as well in terms of the number of students that were being educated at Harvard University, in terms of the number of foreign students. So I want to play that quickly, and then I'll close out with some recommendations that have been suggested to address great inflation.
If you think about the two places Harvard should be investing money, one is they should be growing their student body over time. I graduated, my class was 1,640. Graduating class this year was 1,700. They've grown 4% over 35, 36 years. So in terms of the service they're offering to the country, the number of slots relative to the growth in the population has declined. Percentage of US students versus foreign students went from a small percentage of foreign students to 27% of the most recent class. The result being that in terms of Harvard being a place to educate American leaders, they're not really satisfying that, they've made no progress whatsoever. If you look at...
And as you heard him say there, Harvard is their student body is now made up of over 27% of foreign students. So it goes back into, not only do you have grade inflation, but how is this benefiting the American society? You have to assume that many of the other higher education colleges and universities in the United States have similar or are increasing their foreign student population, which is great from a cultural standpoint because you get a blend of many different cultures and get to learn from each other. But at the same time, many of these students, of course, once they receive their degree, they're going to leave the American society, go back to their countries of origin to, of course, be able to administer some of the education that they've received. But it brings back to the point, as Dr. Rebecca Good was making, that when you have this influx of so many foreign students coming into the higher education and even into lower education levels, there has to be an adjustment of how teaching is occurring. And if you're still trying to use the same teaching formats and methods that were done 30 years ago, well, what ends up happening is what you're seeing now, where grades are just being awarded and not really testing whether or not individuals are receiving and able to capture this information and then, of course, regurgitate it into action. But in terms of some recommendations that have been made to kind of address this, matter of fact, in that report that came out from Harvard University, where they talked about their own failing grade system, in there, the Dean of Education, of Undergraduate Education, Amanda Claybaugh, she had some recommendations in terms of at least how Harvard could address some of the challenges, and very much so it could be applicable to other universities and colleges as well. In her report, she said that number one, she suggested that instructors clearly communicate the quality of work required for a particular grade and consider instituting in-person sit-down exams. She says seated exams are prudent in this age of generative AI. They are also useful for encouraging students to engage with all course material and then tend to produce a broader distribution of grades because, since the pandemic, remote learning and remote technology, of course, has become much more fluent and much more usable. But at the same time, as many of you know already, it is degrading the in-person interaction, which of course in education is so important. It's one of the reasons why higher education, it is one of the benefits of higher education, right? Of learning how to collaborate in team settings. But she also goes on to say that she's advocated for working to standardize grading between different sections of the same course, writing that students are often troubled by inconsistency in grading. But I think one of the big ones that she suggested here was average grading. And average grading is basically showing not only what the final grade is, but also having an average grade that the person achieved during the class. So if they, during the course of the semester, if they had a B average on most of their test or their projects, she wants that to be reported as well, in addition to the final grade, as a suggestion to show, what level that particular student was at. So, I mean, listen, this is a big story and it needs to be top of mind, especially for those of you who may be entering college. This goes for parents and children and students as well. When you're making these decisions regarding these schools, you want to do some investigation in terms of, well, how rigorous is this particular school and why is this school being highlighted as a good school? Because if it's just because 97% of their students graduate, well, you really got to question the graduating with what and why. But that's what I want to talk about today. Like I said, I saw this story and I said, I got to jump on this and get this out there. So, of course, if you would like to leave a comment, you can reach me at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. In addition, you could also reach me at I Am Trey Evans on YouTube. All comments are welcomed. But that's my time for today. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.